Welcome, everybody. You are not going to want to miss this one. This is a great interview, one I've been so excited to do. And I got so many questions from my guests, so you're going to want to stick around. Don't go far because we're going to be right back. And like I said, this is going to be a great interview. You're not going to want to miss it, guys. Welcome, everybody. This is something I've been so excited to talk about. As you guys know, anyone that's been watching my interviews, listening to my radio show, I talk so much about natural law. We get into principles, we get into objective morality, and a lot of my radio shows that I do, even with my co-host Jonathan Wright, that we do on radio, we talk about health and how important health is and how it all comes together. And this is going to be a great interview because we're going to be kind of talking about natural law, our health, how it all comes together, and how this all kind of, if it's working, is a beautiful thing. But if it's not working, in so many cases, it's going to start manifesting itself. I talk about shadow work, guys, which was so important in my life. I think all of these things have to be addressed. And this is I don't want to say it's complex, but it's definitely, there's a way to keep things moving and doing things the proper way. And I think a lot of people we've lost this over the years. I think a lot of people have lost contact with who they truly are. They're not focusing a lot on themselves and doing the work on themselves, which I know is so key. It's been key to my recovery. And so I know how powerful it is. And I'm so excited to get my guest on. I did first see their presentation for Funnel 3, as I've talked about, guys, the Funnel 3 Trivium. I'll leave a link in the description for you guys because you have to check out these presentations. There were so many incredible presentations over 2 days. I saw this lady's presentation and I've watched it like 3 times. It was so powerful to me because it spoke about, as I just said, natural law and health and how it all comes together. The name of the presentation is The Hidden Science of the 5 Biological Laws. And it's go ahead and just welcome my guest who did this presentation, Dr. Melissa Sell. Welcome, Dr. Melissa. As you can tell, I'm excited to have you here. Your presentation, I learned so much about. So I just want to dive into this. As I was telling you off air, right before we started recording, I have health problems. And so your presentation really started to resonate with me and stuff. So I can't wait to get into this. So welcome to the show. Your first time here.
Yay. Thank you, Rick. I'm really excited that you invited me on. I just love talking about this stuff. I feel like everyone needs to know it. It's fundamental. It's natural law, but this is the discovery of a German medical doctor who found these biological laws and how the body, what most people consider disease, is actually an adaptation. It's the wisdom of nature adapting to the circumstances of our life. And so it's a map for understanding what are my health symptoms telling me about the cause. So the effect is the health symptom. The cause, though, it's in the psyche. It's something that went on in your experience, something that's unresolved. And so, yeah, I'm excited to unpack this and kind of get into the details with you guys.
Right. Yeah, it was fascinating. And what, like, for the Funnel 3 presentation, that was like I said, it was really fascinating. And the like when you really break it down. And so how important do you think this is? Like, as I was saying earlier, Dr. Melissa, I've talked so much about natural law. I get into it with a lot of my guests. It's a lot of my work. And then we get into a lot of other topics. And then now lately I've been really getting into health and even doing shadow work. All of this is so important. And this is something I've learned over the years. It's taken time, but I've realized how it all kind of works together. So how important do you think this is? Because I just see people seem to be getting sicker, and they really do. And you see people's health over time. There's a lot of conditions that are starting to pop up. Things are starting to manifest. So how important do you think this is, that people start to put this together and realize what's going on?
I think it's one of the most important aspects that people need to start investigating for themselves, because everyone's got a body. And if you don't know what your symptoms mean, what they're telling you, you are liable to falling into the hands of a system that does not recognize or understand natural law, that overrides natural law, that goes against the body. We use antibiotics. We try to vaccinate. We're trying to outwit. We're trying to distort nature. We're saying nature's screwed up. Nature made mistakes with your body. Nature makes mistakes with bacteria. And here we are, these wise doctors. We need to override what your body is doing, rather than recognizing the biological meaning and purpose behind the symptom and changing your life to get more in alignment with natural law. And it's the misalignment, living out of harmony with nature, which is what causes dis-ease. And all dis-ease is, it's not evil, it's simply adaptation. It's your body, your body's best attempt to survive in an unnatural environment.
Wow, it's fascinating. And so when you bring in your presentation, the hidden science of the 5 biological laws, what do you want to go into these? Like how, like maybe you could break down each of these laws briefly and kind of maybe let people get an idea of what we're talking about. And I'm going to leave a link in the description for your presentation. Please, guys, go check it out because she explains it amazingly. And it's really going to open up your eyes to what's going on with our health. So if you want to touch on the laws, that would be very cool.
Yep. I got to tell a story quickly about Dr. Homer, the discoverer, because it's such a meaningful connection that he made. His 17-year-old son died in a shocking way. Actually, there's a new documentary that came out a few weeks ago on Netflix called The King Who Never Was, which goes into the dramatic politicized story of, it was actually the crown prince, the exiled crown prince of Italy that shot a gun. It went through a boat to where Dr. Homer's son was sleeping. And so it hit him in the femoral artery. He survived for 4 months. He had his leg amputated, but he ended up dying. And so it was a few months after his son died that Dr. Homer developed testicular cancer. And so he and his wife, who was also a medical doctor, were discussing that, you know, this cancer had to be connected to the loss of their son. And so he worked in oncology and had access to cancer patients where he started to talk with them and ask questions. And he started, so, you know, when we observe natural law just is revealed to us through pattern recognition. We notice patterns in nature, and that shows us something that is ever present that we just didn't see before. It's always worked this way since the beginning of time. This is how natural law works. But he saw this connection that every man, and so the connection between like stress and cancer has been around for a while. But what he saw wasn't that just, you know, stress breaks down the body, makes the body weak, and causes cancer to take over. That's a different paradigm. This paradigm and this understanding is that a man lost a child. And so the biology, he saw that every man who had a loss had testicular cancer, or everyone who had testicular cancer had a specific type of loss, rather. And so what that means is that the biology was answering the call. If you lose your offspring, what can your body do to help replace that offspring? It can enhance your reproductive organs. And so the cancer actually is an enhancement of the tissue intended to help the species continue to survive. Because that's ultimately the life principle, is we want to keep this game going. Life promotes life. And so, you know, the idea that cancer is just something that breaks down, that the body has genes that just turn on you, and those genes cause sickness and disease and death, that's anti-life. That doesn't make sense in the context of nature and biology and the life principle. And so when we look at why would the body be doing this, what is the logical, biological reason for testicular cancer is, oh, that organism lost its offspring, and now we're enhancing the tissue in order to reproduce that offspring. For the woman, it's the ovaries. When she has a loss conflict, her ovaries will enhance. And so conventional medicine calls this cancer. It says this is something bad. This is something scary. This is something that shouldn't be happening. But Dr. Homer, he saw through his observation that every cancer has a purpose. It has a biological meaning and function. So lung cancer.
Really? This is fascinating.
I know. Wow. Yeah, lung cancer is a death fright conflict. And so every organ has its purpose. And when you understand the purpose, you can figure out what happened to the person that cause and effect. That's what we're looking at. The biological laws have all of the natural laws present.
That is fascinating. I'm just trying to because you hear so much about cancer like it's getting worse and so many people are getting it, and we can get into a lot of other conditions that are probably manifesting. Cancer is just something we're talking about now, but that's the one part of your presentation that was really that got me shot, like hooked and shocked watching it, was how like you were breaking down and through his research that your body's reacting to the situation, and so it makes sense. But then why, like, so why, like, and I'm probably going to ask some really maybe questions that are not the best questions, but I'm going to try my best to word them, and because I'm really, my mind's going a mile a minute right now. Like, we hear so much about cancer and people passing away from cancer and that, and you're saying that, okay, his body was reacting to the loss of his child and it started to work in that area and start to help. Am I right? So then why is cancer killing people? Let me just put it that way.
So that's the thing is rarely do people actually die of the cancer itself. So
okay.
it can happen. So here's an example is so in nature, when you have a conflict, so a conflict is something shocking that catches you off guard, that you weren't prepared for, that just kind of, you were, unprepared. You felt all alone in the moment, and boom, something happens. And a wild animal is chasing after me. Mm-hmm. In that moment, the body activates this survival adaptation program. And so if I'm in a death fright, my lung alveoli is going to enhance, it's going to grow. There's going to be cancer. There's going to be tissue, extra tissue in the lung, so I can absorb more oxygen, so I can get away from this wild animal that's chasing me. Mm-hmm. And now once I either successfully, run up a tree or get away, that conflict, it's over.
Right.
I'm out of danger. The body will begin to break that tissue down because it's no longer needed. However, if I'm constantly going back into the danger, and that doesn't make sense. An animal's it's going to learn, oh, don't go by that spring, don't go over by that water hole because there's danger over there. It learns and does something different. But when we keep reactivating it and we keep going around our triggers that cause the cancer to grow, we can have something grow so big that it interrupts some vital function. So in the colon, for example, is a conflict of an indigestible morsel conflict. So think of something that I can't digest this. I can't accept this. I'm angry about this. I can't process this. And if you are constantly in that conflict, the colon can grow a tumor that gets so big that it blocks the passageway. And so in that situation, the cancer can block something. But typically what happens is that people get diagnosed, and because we have this fear around cancer, because we don't know what it means, it's because of a misunderstanding. If you're coughing up blood, or if there's blood in the toilet, if you understood this map, you'd understand I'm in the healing phase. My body's in the repair phase rather than, oh no, something bad is happening. Because once a person gets scared, I think that the biggest cause of death is fear. It's this fear that causes a person to think I'm dying. We know this from like placebo nocebo studies where people can, there's a story of a man, he got locked into a freezer room but the freezer wasn't on. And so he just thought that he was locked in this freezing cold room. The freezer wasn't even on. It was normal temperature, but he believed that he was locked in a freezer room and he died because he was afraid. But it wasn't even an abnormal temperature. He simply believed that it was. And so we see how the fear and the, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me, causes additional conflicts. And so it's the compounding of a lot of different conflicts, unresolved situations in people's life. And once again, they're not living in harmony with nature. We should live nice long lives where either we get, eaten by an animal or we, eventually, conflicts. And that's the thing, is the whole goal is not to never have a conflict. Conflict is a part of life. Conflict is how we evolve. We have a challenge, we have a struggle, and we find a solution for it. And so, there is a natural progression. I think that no one dies at the wrong time. I think that natural law, like, ultimately is playing out in every single person's life and in their experience. But yeah, there are, I think, a lot of people dying early and suffering a lot unnecessarily simply because they're living out of alignment with these principles. And so the thing to wrap your mind around, it's not that cancer can't lead to death. It's that cancer is a meaningful adaptation. And so, but if you have a meaningful adaptation happen for too long, where you are reactivating it again and again and again, that survival program can lead to your demise simply because it wasn't meant to be reactivated so many times.
That makes a lot of sense. The way that you just explained it. I know people right now are probably going, "Oh my God, like cancer. What is she saying? Cancer is good." I don't think that's what you're saying, but if I'm understanding you right, I almost look at what you're saying as cancer is a early warning, like an early warning system, and then it starts the healing process. Am I right?
So it's more that it in and of itself is an adaptation. So again, when I am in a death fright, immediately my brain senses death fright and it activates my brain stem. There's a region in the brain stem that activates, and then my lung alveoli grows so that every breath I take in that moment, the thing that we call cancer is the body's, it's kind of like going into super mode. Like the lung cells can go into hyper mode so they can absorb more oxygen. And so they're purposeful. And so again, it's not a bad thing. It's a meaningful adaptation to a situation. I need it in order to survive. That's why I have it. Every program has, if you think back to some ancestor in your developmental history, this provided a survival advantage. Because again, the life principle, life wants to keep on living.
Mm-hmm.
That means it has to adapt to unexpected things that happen. How does the body adapt? It can grow extra cells. It can widen a passageway. So for example, like the coronary arteries get wider when you have a territorial loss conflict. There's more, we have to widen the blood vessel so that more blood can pump through. Can you see? It's like, it's meaningful. The body's doing it for a purpose. And once the conflict is resolved, the body restores itself. So if we built up a tumor, the body actually uses bacteria. So here's a great example. Tuberculosis. So people think, oh, tuberculosis, it's a terrible contagious illness. And if someone's coughing and you get near them and the tuberculosis bug gets on you, you're going to get tuberculosis too. So we need to wear masks and do vaccines. That's not how it works. So when someone has a death fright conflict, so let's say your child gets sent off to war, and now you're afraid for their life. You're like, is my kid going to die? So you're having a death fright conflict for your child. You're worried about them. Your lung is building up this extra tissue because it's in this shock, in this fear. And then your child comes home from war. Oh, what a relief. Then the body, it uses, so bacteria, this is another thing Dr. Hammer discovered. And again, this is radical. This is completely opposite of what everything we've been told. Again, it makes sense in the context of nature and natural law. Nature doesn't do anything for no reason. And there is no evil in nature. Nature only does what is meaningful and purposeful. And so the bacteria in the lungs, the tubercular bacteria, it's like the construction crew. And so we built up this extra tissue because we were in a death fright, and now we don't need it anymore. And so the construction crew comes in and the tubercular bacteria breaks down the tumor that's no longer needed. And so when this is happening, you're coughing up blood and mucus. And you're like, oh no, I'm sick. But you're not actually sick. Your body is in this repair phase, but you're misinterpreting the symptoms to think this means I'm sick. This means I'm going to die. And the thing that people actually would die from is protein loss. And that's why wealthy people tended to survive tuberculosis, whereas poor people didn't survive. It was simply because when you have this adaptation going on and your body is breaking down using tubercular bacteria, it takes a lot of protein. And so typically people would die simply because they didn't have enough protein to go through the whole healing phase. And so that's just an example of how the bacteria gets blamed for causing the disease, but it's not the cause, it's the effect. The cause is the death fright that shocked the person, that caused their body to go into this adaptation so they could absorb more oxygen. And then once they resolved the conflict, the body started to decompose the tumor. You started coughing it up. And so this, when you see the bigger meaning and the biological reasoning behind the whole thing, the whole script changes, the whole narrative around who the bad guy is. You know,
Yeah.
those where you're like, I don't know who the bad guy is. Sometimes, you know, like Harry Potter, they think the whole time you think Snape, he's the bad guy. It turns out like, oh, he's actually helping. You know, like that's kind of how I see these adaptations like cancer. It's like you thought it was the bad guy. You thought the bacteria was bad. You thought the cancer was bad, but it was actually helping you. It was an adaptation that you didn't recognize.
Wow, it just shows how fascinating now now I'm looking at the body in a whole different way. Like, and I'm looking at illness now in a whole different way just from what you're saying. And I got so many questions now, so I hope I'm going to try to keep them straight, but from what you're saying. So what I'm getting is that, okay, this is a response to something that's going on externally and your body's reacting. Now the part that I really honed in on is you gave the example of a child going off to war. The parent's body reacts because it's a stressful thing, but when the child comes back, the body goes, okay, we can settle down. They're back. They're out of danger. Starts the healing process. What I'm noticing is so important is there has to be a point where that stress relieves itself. If it doesn't, and it keeps building and building and building, is where you're going to run into problems. Am I correct?
Yes, exactly. So it's the unresolved conflict that causes a humongous tumor to grow or causes, you know, something that's unresolved. And that's why we have to recognize, we have to be aware of the conflicts that are going on in our lives. So a couple of things that you can tell is if you got preoccupied thinking. So if a mother's constantly worried about her child, there's probably a conflict going on. Or if she wakes up in the middle of the night. So if you wake up around like 3 in the morning every night and there's like a stress on your mind, that's an indication of a conflict. Your psyche is waking you up to say, you need to resolve this. We need a solution. We need a solution. And so we have to resolve our conflicts in a timely manner, because some conflicts, if they go on for too long, the body can only take so much. You know, so we want to keep the conflicts we want to recognize and resolve them as swiftly as possible.
Wow, yeah, because I'm just really, I'm just saying, like, I'm just thinking the body, if this is amazing, like, it's so opposite of what we've been told. That's the first thing I'm thinking about, because, you know, you hear about all these medical conditions people are getting, and they're not talking like you're talking. They're not, you know, and I'm just thinking, like, if the body's in this state, say with a cancer state, and what's the first thing that's going to happen when you go to the doctor? They're going to test you. They're going to see that you have these cancer cells in your body, and they're not going to say what you said. They're going to all of a sudden start hammering you with all these medications, and when the whole time the body's actually doing what it's designed to do, but what they're doing is interrupting that and just start throwing medications into people. Wow, this is crazy.
I know, and fear. And so that's one of the worst things that happens when you go into the medical doctor is they fill you with fear. And so Dr. Hammer discovered, so they have this idea that, oh, the cancer is just going to spread everywhere else, and it's so dangerous, and we have to get it out, and you have to, you know, go against you. You have to poison your body. We have to cut it out. We've got to burn it out. We've got to get this thing out because it's going to spread. But Dr. Hammer found that it's actually additional conflict. So when you get a diagnosis and you think, you know, let's say you get a breast cancer diagnosis, and then you equate in your mind a breast cancer diagnosis with death. So you get a death threat conflict. And so now your lungs start to adapt, or you have a self-devaluation and your bones start to adapt, or you're worried about how you're going to pay for the treatment. And so your liver starts to adapt. And then they test you in 3 months and they say, oh, the cancer is spread to your lungs, to your bones, to your liver. But what you had was a death threat conflict, a self-devaluation conflict, and a starvation conflict that is now affecting those organs. And so they're causing, through the fear that they strike in a person when they diagnose them, additional conflict shocks that lead to the tissue adaptations that they say, oh, the cancer is spreading.
Wow. So this can definitely build upon one fear, can build upon another fear, giving the illusion of spreading, but it's not spreading the way that we're thinking it is. Like, it's like this cancer is jumping and going all through the body. It's just that these fears are accumulating. And if you don't realize that you have to address these fears, this is where it just keeps snowballing, essentially.
Exactly. And so that's where, so when people say, well, why do so many people die from cancer? They die from the fear and the additional conflicts and the treatments that are given that override the body, and they feel unsafe in their own. And this is one of the things that, is why I'm so passionate about sharing this with people, because to be afraid of your own body, to feel like the myth of autoimmune disease, that your body can just turn on you and it just breaks itself down, or that, this cancer it's part of you, and you think that it's a wrongness. There's something bad or evil that shouldn't be in my body, but there is nothing evil in nature. And so it's such a, it's evil to implant the idea that your body can turn against you in the mind of a person. I know that everything my body is doing all of the time is for my greatest benefit. It's for my survival, because it is programmed with life. It's programmed to reproduce. It's programmed to live. That, and everything my body will do is going to be based around my survival first and foremost, and then making offspring. And so if my body is adapting, it's to fulfill one of those two purposes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what's really like, this is really different. Like, I'm so glad we're having this discussion, because and I was telling you before we started recording that I've told people on this show 100 times, they're probably sick of me talking about I don't really talk about it a lot, but I brought it up enough that people should know my condition, that I have ankylosing spondylitis. I was letting you know that I got diagnosed. I started showing symptoms at 16, got diagnosed at 17. And they kind of, like, nobody in my family has this condition. I went back as far as I can. There's a little bit of arthritis here and there for people that are elderly, which I think that's what they told me that's normal. But nothing of what I have. And they were just like, oh, it's your genetics, it's luck of the draw kind of thing. Now you have me thinking in a whole different way, that my condition showed up from something that was happening beforehand in my life that wasn't being addressed. Am I correct?
Totally. So the spine, the bones, and this was really interesting for me because my background is I'm a chiropractor. And so I often saw people with, bone and spine and joint issues. And I thought it had to do with simple misalignment. Oh, the spine is out of alignment, and that's what's the cause of the problem. But Dr. Hammer's discovery is that the connective tissue is linked to your self-value, your self-worth as a human. And so the different areas of the body, and this actually applies not just to humans but to animals can have self-devaluation conflicts also. So it's the bone structure. And so when we devalue ourselves, when we feel shattered, when we feel not good enough, when we feel broken, when we feel like the core, so we look at the spine, the core of your self-esteem, if you don't feel backed up, if you feel unsupported, if you feel blocked in some way, if you feel that you have been devalued, the tissue breaks down during the conflict. And then when you resolve it, it builds up and gets stronger. But if we break it down and build it up and break it down and build it up over time, those joints will start to fuse together. And so that is the condition of ankylosing spondylitis, is that, that's like your whole spine is starting to fuse together. And it's literally your body's response to try to make you stronger. But the problem is that we go back into the conflict. We break down and build up. If you had gone through it just one time and you're like, okay, I'm good now, I'm not feeling devalued, it wouldn't have progressed to complete fusion. It goes through that process because your whole self-esteem, your self-image, how you think about yourself, you're constantly being reminded of that stuff that happened when you were 15, 16 years old, when this was first developing. You were developing your identity, your ideas about yourself, how you feel about yourself, the core of who you are. And so if that was an ongoing struggle, it makes sense that the body would continue to adapt. And that's ripping the scab off. We're like feeling a little better and then a little worse and a little better, a little worse. And so again, we break down tissue, then build it up. And over time, that buildup of tissue can cause fusion.
You describe my disease perfect. Actually, I'm just like, wow. Like, and it makes sense too. And it makes sense too about the whole self-esteem issue, because I did struggle with that for a lot of years in my early years. It was just everything that you kind of said. It kind of fits right into what I was going through. And so it makes total sense. And as soon as you told me that, I was just like, wow, because I was letting you know that, going through, I was in Catholic school for the first 8 years of schooling, and it was really a tough time for me. I still that was something I had to really deal with. Those first 8 years of my schooling, because I asked so many questions and I was always questioning, and especially the religious aspect of it, I was very questioning and wanted to know things. I was always being punished. I was always in the office. My parents were being called in for asking questions. And then as I was getting in trouble with the teachers, then the kids started piling it on me because they were getting, they were kind of, and I kind of got bullied a lot in those years. And it makes sense because it just showed up out of nowhere. It wasn't like I had any warning symptoms or anything like that. It was like one year I was healthy. Next year, my body went into chaos. It was just chaos. And like I said, it took a year for them to find out what it was and actually put a name to it, because it wasn't as common back then. At least that's what they told me. Like it is now, they know a lot more about it. But it makes a lot of sense that all this turmoil that was going on beforehand, this was just my body reacting. See, if this would have changed my whole outlook, Dr. Melissa, if the doctors would have told me what you were telling me.
I know.
And oh my God.
It changes everything, because then it's like, okay, so here I am, there's parts I've got a self-esteem issue, and now you're telling me I've got a terrible rare disease that as a teenager, like what's that going to do for your self-esteem? If you understand, listen, your body is doing something for you. We have to figure out why this message is being sent of devaluation, because the only reason your bones would change in this way, there is nothing random happening. It's cause and effect. There we are with natural law. For every effect, there is a cause. And so we can't say, oh, it's just something random, just something genetic. No one in my family has this. This isn't common for teenagers. This isn't common in my family. There's got to be a cause. Okay, right. So what was going on in this individual child's life? Devaluation, bullying, harsh authoritarian religious environment. It's like, duh. It now makes sense.
That it makes so much sense. And so then basically, when we look at what they call diseases, and I know I remember in your presentation, like I don't even like to use that word myself. I kind of talk, if I do talk about it, I call it an inconvenience. I don't like the word disease anymore. I just know that words have power. So I'm very conscious and working on how I speak to myself and how I say certain things. So when I say this, anybody listening, if I say, but this is my inconvenience, that's what I'm talking about, is my condition. So everybody that has something they're dealing with physically, like a health problem, it's stemming from something that they're not dealing with, correct?
Yes.
Something in their life that they're not addressing.
Yep.
Wow. That is such a powerful thing. So this is very, like, I talk a lot, Dr. Melissa, about shadow work and doing the work on yourself is so important. And it's something I learned. I didn't know this right away. I figured it out over time, that taking the time to really get to know myself, listen to myself, and start going through my life and these things that bother me and then really addressing them. This is key to one's health, correct?
100%. That intuition that you had to go into the shadow, that's the thing, is what are the things that keep me up at night, that are constantly on my mind, that I keep coming back to? What keeps showing up in my life? Money problems, relationship problems. This is bringing you back to some core fundamental. Often these things start in childhood. Often but they keep coming up to be resolved. We keep finding ourselves in the same bad situation again and again, because it is the life cycle of, let's see, is she going to do something different this time? Is she going to respond in a new way? Is she going to evolve beyond this current level of experience? And so, yes, every chronic symptom has an unresolved conflict. So chronic digestive issues, something indigestible, feeling cheated, feeling deprived, feeling angry that someone, took something from you that you couldn't fully digest, something ugly that happened that you just haven't let go of, you haven't processed, skin issues, rashes, eczema, psoriasis. It's a separation conflict. It's either wanting to bring someone close or wanting to push someone away. Acne, it's feeling ugly or feeling disfigured, feeling attacked or feeling soiled. And so again, the skin is responding in a specific way depending on the flavor of the unresolved conflict. So every conflict, again, it's got its theme: chronic pain, self-devaluation, thyroid issues, feeling too slow, feeling behind, feeling powerless. And so we are able to, and this is what Dr. Hammer figured out with this map, decode this organ has a purpose. This organ goes into hyper mode when it is in a conflict shock, when there's something that's unresolved. What's causing this organ to keep going back into hyper mode? And so I have to figure that out, resolve the conflict so my body can get back into harmony.
That makes this makes more sense to me. What this research said he did, and what you're bringing and letting people know about, and what we're talking about, this resonates with me, with what you're saying. Like, and I can speak from experience. I've been through the medical system. Believe me, I've been through it. I've been experimented on. I could do show after show and tell people what has been done to me. Never was this ever discussed. Actually, I don't even think for the most of my condition I don't ever think health was discussed, like in nutrition and anything like that. It was always give me a medication and just cover it up, basically the symptoms. Nothing ever like this was broken down to me. It would have changed my whole outlook on my condition. I'm being serious. If somebody would have told me this and said, listen, you got to deal with some shit that's going on in your life, that would have been so valuable information. So I'm glad we're talking about this, because I think a lot of people, especially now, Dr. Melissa, the way the world is, people, I would generally think that most people would agree with my statement here, is that most people are living in some state of fear, that they kind of propagate this fear constantly. Anywhere you go, if you're in the social media, if you're looking at news, anywhere you really look, there's this state of fear that people are in. And then it makes total sense why you see people's health declining, and that's for one of the reasons, like you're saying, the state of fear that people are in. This is bad. This is really bad, the state that people are in, is it not? Like, this has to be addressed and talked about, because if we're in this state of fear, it's only going to get worse. Am I right?
You are so right. And get this. So this is another huge thing. So related to the scamdemic. So the conflict. So what did everyone say? The Rona, the scary respiratory virus that they said was spreading around. What are the symptoms? We've got a cough, a little bit of fever, and we're tired. Oh, and if I spit on a stick, it says, oh, you're positive for this big scary disease. Okay, so we have to look at what organ is associated with these symptoms. The bronchial mucosa. So the lining of the bronchioles, there's a mucosal lining. And if we feel the conflict is, so the fear, it's a territorial fear. It's feeling unsafe in my territory is what is causing adaptation. So remember, there is no disease, there's only adaptation. The body adapts to the fear. If I'm in a territorial fear, if I feel threatened, if I feel like, ooh, this could be a dangerous situation, the bronchioles are going to widen so that we can get more air in and we can get out of this scary situation. Doesn't that make perfect sense? I'm afraid. My body says she's afraid in her territory. She needs more air in her lungs. Let's widen this passageway so she can get that air in. And then once she's safe, oh, what a relief. Okay, so I'm out of that danger. I'm away from that danger. Now the bronchioles start to rebuild. And so when we're rebuilding that lining, oh, I cough. I've got, a fever, and I'm tired because I was under stress. I was in fight or flight. My body was adapting. My bronchioles were widening, and now they're healing. That's all that and then they test you and they say, oh, we found a virus. The virus theory is absolutely incorrect. It's all smoke and mirrors. There is no virus. They've never isolated a virus and been able to take a virus out of one person, put it on someone else and make them sick. They've never been able to do that. It is an illusion, a delusion that has been shoved down our throats through the media for the last 200 years. Well, 50, with the virus theory is more recent. So, but the thing is that it doesn't work the way they say it does. But the fear, like you're talking about, people are living in fear. So what did we do? We broadcast it everywhere. We put everyone under the spell. We cast the spell of the scary particle that's going to come from your neighbor, from your mother, from your grandmother onto you, or you onto them, and it's going to make you sick. What kind of fear does that incite in people? Territorial fear. So I'm even more afraid in my territory. Oh, that person's not wearing a mask. Oh, that person didn't get vaccinated. So I'm scared. I'm scared of my neighbor. I'm scared to go outside. And who are the people who got the most, quote, COVID? Were people who were vaccinated and wearing masks. I mean, which
Yeah.
is, how are these people who are doing all of their, superstitious rituals still getting because they're still afraid. And every time they got a vaccine, they felt relieved. And so they got, COVID. It's
Yeah.
because they were going through an adaptation and a healing process. And you cannot vaccinate against an adaptation and a healing process. It's programmed into your biology. You can't vaccinate against it. You can't medicate against it. Your body's always going to work in this way.
That makes so much sense, and I'm thinking about, and I'm glad that we're kind of talking about this, the whole plan or scamdemic, I call it too, because pandemic, whatever people want to call it, because that this is so relevant, and I keep bringing it up to people, Dr. Melissa, because people forget things and they move on to the next thing. So I like to bring back every once in a while and
Good.
talk about this because they shut the world down, and I let people know the seriousness of what they did and how they controlled people. I was shocked. Even I was shocked. I knew people were a lot of people were sheep and went along to get along and all what, all the cliche things you hear, but I didn't realize it was as they had people as programmed as I thought till this. And then you're right. A lot of people I know that have gotten the vaccine and done everything that they were told to do, they seem to be the ones getting sick. After the first week, I knew what was up, and I swear to God, guys, I've said this. You can go back to my other shows before all of this. I was telling people like, okay, something's not right here. So I didn't really scare. I wasn't scared of it. I never got sick. I haven't got sick from it yet at all. And I'm around people, and I just never bought into it. So it makes sense why I'm not showing symptoms or anything, because there's no fear there. I just whatever, I just didn't give it really any second thought after the first week, and I saw what was happening. So it makes a lot of sense what you're saying, like why people are showing these symptoms and how they kept pumping the fear constant for like a long time. This wasn't like a week or a weekend, constant.
And it is. And when you understand that there's a fear, there is a cause for every effect, and every organ, it responds to a certain type of fear, a certain type of a shock. And you can start to understand every symptom and look back on your life. I mean, it's been so fascinating, so for you in this condition, it's like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If you've ever had a urinary tract infection, it's not an infection. It's not a bacteria that gets in the urinary tract. It's a territory marking conflict where so think about it. So you have to, an animal, what does it do to mark its territory? It pees on it.
Yep.
And so when you are having a territory marking conflict, so for a man, it's like his outer territory. For a woman, it's her inner territory, so her partner. So women, this is like a huge thing for women. If they have, if their man is talking to a coworker or something, that's my territory, And so what happens is the urethra, it gets wider so that we can better mark our territory. I want to be able to pee better than she can pee. And so so the body widens the urethra. And then once you mark your territory, so this is kind of a common thing for women, like after having sex, that they'll, quote, get an infection. But you didn't get an infection, you marked your territory. And so the conflict is resolved after that. And so when you have the burning, painful kind of feeling of having a urinary tract infection, all that's happening is your tissue is rebuilding after you marked your territory. And it's like, whoa, this is just one of these mind-blowing things that starts to make so much sense when you understand, what does this tissue, what is this organ, what's its purpose? Why would it go into an adaptation? And what is the correlating event in my life that led me into having that experience?
So that, as we were just I keep getting back to I keep thinking like it's just so important that people start doing the work on themselves and really getting into the things that are going on in their life and addressing them. I mean, I know from a young age, Dr. Melissa, I was told, don't look at the dark things, kind of push them down. Like that's negative. You don't want to focus on it. Everything that I should have been doing, I was told not to do. And it's really becoming apparent to me that people have to really, and I've talked about shadow work and doing the work, but now you're really hammering this home, how important this is. And even, I don't think I'm even saying it enough to people that this is really key, that you have to take time to get to know who you are. I've said for a long time, I think most people don't even connect with themselves anymore. They're so busy, they're pulled in so many different directions. How many people are really sitting down and even listening to their body, or taking any time in just quiet? I do it every day. I try to sit quiet, and I try to really focus in on myself and address things that are bothering me. And as soon as something bothers me, I want to know why, and I want to address it. And I think I've just picked this up. It's just something I've learned over time. But it's really key that people start addressing the things that are wrong in their life.
Yes, you are.
Wow.
You got it. Like I love everything that you're saying, because you're right. That's the key. I have to pay attention. And that's like all the work that I do is about awareness. And so it's about sitting with yourself, watching your thoughts, watching, the stories and the narratives and the fears that you're getting sucked into, and turn the lights on. That's what awareness is to me. It's like, we have to bring it out of the shadows and into the light. We have to find a solution. We have to figure out, why am I still dealing with this same problem? Why haven't I changed my life? If I need to quit that job or leave this relationship, why haven't I done it yet? What about me is still addicted to this suffering, this problem? What in my childhood is unaddressed? Who haven't I forgiven? What haven't I let go? What can I change? Who do I need to talk to? And it's like, we sit with it. We get distracted, like you said, by social media and activism, and we're just like externally oriented, and we pay no attention to that stuff that's underneath, the stuff that's keeping us up at night. And that is, the inner work is everything. That self-reflection, that shadow work, that doing, going within, finding out what's unresolved. And that's the key to feeling better physically, mentally, it's the key to everything. And so if people would just start, and I just love that that's the message that you're sharing, because that really is the core of all of it. This is an invitation to look at something that I'm not looking at.
Absolutely. And that's what changed my whole, like, it's really changing my life. And it's not, and I always tell people, it's a kind of a long game. It's not a one and done, and you kind of sit down for a couple hours, you do a little bit of shadow work, you're like, hey, I'm done. Or you do it for a weekend or even a month. This is something I've been doing every day it's been building up, and it's slowly, I'm seeing the results. Now, what I want to ask you too is how important, because I'm trying to look at everything as a whole. How important is our diet? Because I know where I live, people's diets are atrocious, and you can see the results of that and how people look. People are getting very obese. There's a lot of people, there's a weight problem going on, and you see what people are, all these fast food places and stuff like that. For me, the game changer was really focusing in and getting great food. Now, how important is that in the process? Doing the shadow work, is it also key that we change what we're taking into our body?
So for me, I used to be extremely focused on diet. I thought that all diseases had to do with diet. I thought that inflammatory foods were the cause of inflammation in the body. But I see it differently now, knowing the map of the 5 biological laws. And so nutrition definitely is still important. And we want to be eating foods that are in alignment with nature. We don't want to, that's the thing, is fast food, packaged foods, factory made foods. It's just unnatural. It's not what the body developed eating. We want to eat as close to alignment with nature. However, bad food in and of itself doesn't, for example, cause cancer. I used to think that. I thought that, like, McDonald's and, eating non-organic food, I thought that caused cancer, but now I know that it doesn't, because we know people who, eat fast food and hot dogs and drink beer and smoke cigarettes and eat over 100. And it's like, well, what's the deal with that guy? And we also know people who, she's 40, she eats all organic, she does yoga, and she has breast cancer and dies. And it's like, so obviously nutrition isn't everything. Otherwise we wouldn't have those great disparities. So I think that nutrition and eating intentionally is a sign of self-value. So a person who just doesn't care and like eats bad food and, drinks soda and just will grab something fast at the convenience store to eat and put that in their body, they don't have very high self-value. And so it's the unresolved, I think that distracted living, that not doing the inner work, not doing the shadow work is what causes. So I think that the bad eating is, again, it's the effect, not the cause. You know, the cause is lack of introspection, lack of self-value, lack of living in integrity and alignment with nature is what leads to the effect of, you know, sedentary living, watching too much TV, you know, playing video games or doing things that are unresourceful while eating a bunch of crap. So again, I see that as an effect, not the cause. The cause is the lack of the inner work. And I think when you do the inner work, you will naturally start to eat in a way that reflects self-value, eat in a way that makes sense for your natural biology. So do you see kind of there's like a nuanced difference where, yes, the nutrition and changing your diet is very important, but it's downstream of the inner changes that will come naturally once you are focused on the unresolved stuff in here.
That makes a lot of sense because that's what happened to me. I'm like, not that I had a bad diet, I didn't eat enough. I wasn't like a very light eater, but I did have my share of junk food too. I'm not trying to fool anyone, but you're absolutely right. I noticed as I started doing the work on myself, naturally my diet started to change. It was a really, and it wasn't even something I was really aware of at first until then somebody brought it up to me, because as I was doing this work over time on myself and really addressing the things going on like that bothered me and that were really, you know, slowing me down, and I kind of started to deal with them and work through them, my diet slowly started to change more natural foods. It was really a weird, now I'm at the point where I'm almost like, it's very rare that I'll have unhealthy food, but it was through the process of working on myself that it changed automatically, kind of like what you're saying. It was really neat. I don't know how to say it, but it was just something that was happening over time as I did the work on myself.
Exactly. And that's the thing is when it's like the way that I'm living is an outward expression of what's going on the inside. And this kind of gets back to the principle of all is mind. It's all happening in the psyche first, and everything else is downstream of what's going on in here, in the psyche, in the soul, in the spirit, in the mind. And so when I change, when I get interested in what's going on in here, the external just will naturally start to reflect that. You know, a person who, you know, their physical body, if it's in bad shape, it's just an indication of the conflicts that are unresolved within them. You know, so if a person is holding on to a lot of weight, they likely have had an abandonment conflict where they felt all alone and isolated, and their body held on to water because they felt so, you know, desperate and afraid. Or they're dealing with a fear disgust conflict and they're constantly eating because their blood sugar is crashing because they're, you know, they're in this adaptation from something scary and disgusting that happened to them. And so it's like when you can see with such compassion what's going on with a person, with their body. I mean, you can even understand the whole range of sexuality when you understand how conflicts work. So like a really masculine woman or a woman who wants to be a man, it's because she had a sexual conflict. And so her sexuality shut off and she became very masculine because it was very unsafe to be feminine in, you know, because she had a sexual shock. You know, and a man, if he's lost his territory, he blocks his masculine side and becomes more feminine. And so everything, you know, has its poles, everything has its swing. And when we understand and we work backwards and look at a person's timeline, everything about their appearance, their interests, their, you know, like whether they get tattoos, things like that, it sense. It's like, oh, this has to do with the stuff that's happened to you, the way it changed your brain, the way your psyche has adapted to the life that you've lived. It's like, oh, this, you know, it's, and you have, again, such compassion for people because you see that they are living out the effects of these unseen internal psyche causation. And if you can help that person to make those connections, they can become free from that stuckness, that pattern that they're just living out in unconsciousness.
Wow, and it really is showing the power of the mind. Is what that's what I'm really noticing too, is how powerful our mind is, and I think people have even stopped to realize that because that. And we kind of talked, you kind of brought it up earlier, like you see people too. Like I know people that you know, they smoked for 75 years of their life or whatever. There was never got cancer, they never got anything. And I always wondered that. I'm like, why do some people get it and why don't some? And you explain that perfectly, and that's something that's always fascinated me too, Dr. Lissa, is like, why do some people show symptoms and get things and why don't other people's, and there never seem to be a rhyme or reason when you look externally. But the way you're breaking it down, when you start looking internally and seeing what's going on in their life, it just resonates. It makes sense. Like it's just an echo of what's going on internally and manifesting itself. This is so powerful. Wow.
Right? I know. I'm so glad that you're into it and that like you saw the depth and the meaning, because I do think that some people kind of, they're either not ready for it, or they just kind of say, oh yeah, mind body, and they don't see like the depth and the meaningfulness and kind of like the mind blowing, like this is earth shattering. This changes absolutely everything.
It changes the way I'm looking at everything now. It really is, and that's what your presentation did. I was just like, wow, and I think it resonated mostly a lot with me because of this inconvenience I have is what I think I really resonated with it, and I was like, wow, it makes sense to me. This makes sense, and then I know people are going to say, well, we need doctors now. I've never said that there's no reason to go see a doctor. If you have a broken leg or something, go to the doctor. I mean, they have their purposes, but what bothers me and it seems like from what you've explained is so unnatural, is that like as your body's trying to heal itself, they're hindering it with all these medications and that are they aware of what's going on? Do you think they're even aware of this? I know it's hard to speak for everybody, but do you think doctors are aware of this and they're just going along with the program, or they're not even taught this?
Well, so some definitely are, because Dr. Hammer, he presented his thesis in 1981 to the university in Tübingen in Germany to, hey, look at what I've discovered. And he had several experiences of doing like a university panel where basically he'd have 8 cases and he would say, this is my theory, this is what I'm saying is happening. And they would check through and all of the points. And that's the thing about, again, Dr. Hammer's system is it's based on biological natural law, which means it's reproducible. In every case, you can see these markers. You can see the conflict. You can see the impact in the brain. You can see the changes on the tissue level. You can see the body go through all of these different, I think there's like 150 different points for each case potentially. And so it would have to be an absolute, it's not mathematically possible that it would be the same every single time if it wasn't a natural law. And he proved it in front of these university panels, but they have refused to validate, to accept, or to acknowledge his thesis in any way. He had his license taken away. So there are people behind closed doors that have validated and verified his findings, but it has not gotten into the universities. And what they do is they vilify him. So I mentioned that documentary that goes through this on Netflix, The King Who Never Was. It's this whole story about, how this, Prince shot the gun, hit Dr. Hammer's son, this whole kind of big drama. And they even mention, they don't talk about his discovery. They just mention, oh yeah, he came up with this, crazy cancer theory, and, doctors are getting their license taken away for using it. So they, paint it in a really negative light, because this would, if modern medicine actually was legit, and if it cared about people, and if it was using this natural biological wisdom, it would reduce to about 5%. So like you said, emergency services. And there are, even when you know this knowledge, sometimes you do, if a conflict has gone on for so long, like I mentioned with a big colon tumor, surgery. You just remove the colon tumor, and that's absolutely necessary, life-saving intervention, very helpful. But 95% of the drugs and the treatments and the, what we're giving to people to basically help them stay sick, because when you medicate, you override the body's natural responses. You don't have to change your life. You get to keep having the same ongoing conflict. We just add some chemicals on top of it so that you can cope, but you never actually evolve. So it's halting evolution when you take a medication to suppress a symptom rather than figuring out the cause, doing the inner work, doing the shadow work, pulling it out into the light, resolving that conflict. It allows people to stay at this halted level of evolution, living unnatural lives, going to jobs that are unnatural, eating foods that are unnatural. We wouldn't last very long doing that if we didn't have, these, uppers and downers to numb us out and to make it copable, and so that's why it's doing such a humongous disservice. And yes, some medical professionals know about this, and how do they make their money? They make their money in pills and potions and giving treatments. And, they don't care about your personal evolution. You have to care about your personal evolution. When you go into the medical world, you have to know that they are not recognizing natural law. They're not recognizing the meaningfulness of these adaptations. They are seeing you as, just another idiot who's like willing to take the pill, who's willing to,
wow.
And so again, are there some good? Of course, there's some good, well-meaning doctors who are just doing their best, but they are under the influence of a broken system that is anti-life and anti-nature and anti-everything that life and nature stands for. And so, by being a part of it, they are against you, and so unless you recognize that and go in, can you utilize their services? Of course, when necessary. But so many people are using it unnecessarily, driving they're driven by fear. They're driven by this delusion that their body is making a mistake and turning on them. And so, it's like we need a complete overhaul in our understanding in how we utilize that system.
It definitely, you're right. It would be. It's going to have to be a complete overhaul on how the medical profession even approaches illness or any what we're talking about. Because, and just resonates what you're saying. How they give you pills, because that's all they ever did with me. It was they never, like I was saying earlier, they never spoke about what we're speaking about. It was always just give them pain meds, give them, and just keep covering up the symptoms, and that's what they're doing. And so it's really powerful what we're talking about. As you said, this is the key. And I totally agree with you. I've seen the results in my life slowly. It's changing everything. And I even think about people, Dr. Melissa, who you hear people that, they miraculously heal. You hear, everybody's heard of these stories. I've even heard of people that, they had my condition, and over time they've actually kind of straighten themselves up, and it was all through the power of the mind. When you talk to them and people ask them, like, how did you do this? For hours a day, they would focus in on the area, and they would start picturing it healthy and redesigning it in their mind. And I've seen a few stories like that, and it's showing the power of our thoughts and how it can manifest and change things. There's everybody's heard stories of people that just miraculously recover. That's fascinating to me. That's something I've always wondered, is like, what is going on in their mind?
Yeah, medicine doesn't want to, like, conventional medicine doesn't want to talk about spontaneous remission.
They never do.
How do you explain that? They can't explain it. It's an embarrassment to them, because it's like, oh, this thing can just go away on its own without my surgery and my holy intervention. Because that's the thing, is it really is a religion. When you look at medicine and everything is in Latin, and we have to give you, you have, these fancy diagnoses. And it's like, no, this is an adaptation of the joints, and anybody can understand this. We have to break down this idea of the holy authority who gives you the diagnosis and also gives you the cure. So we have to see how we are engaging, and that, doctor worship has been ingrained and embedded in the media, and you see it in TV shows, you see it, and people let me go to my doctor. I have a good doctor. And it's like, their system, again, their paradigm isn't about helping this young man. What has gone on in your life where you have lost your self-value? No, here's a pill. Like, they didn't get to know you and your unique circumstance and what was going on with you. They just saw, some stuff's happening to his spine. Okay, he's in pain. Let's give him this. Let's give him some it's like, it's completely not honoring of, again, this brilliant. They don't recognize the body is brilliant. The body built itself from scratch. How to build new bodies. The body is ancient, and it's wise, and it's embedded with this wisdom. They say, the body's stupid. Here, take these pills.
And totally disregarding nature and then the whole process of the body. And I'm glad we're kind of talking about that, because that's the one thing I've learned over working on myself, is that it's amazing what the body can accomplish. And when you really start working on yourself, and that's the thing I'm learning. I've had doctors my whole life telling me that I couldn't do certain things. Like, you'll never be able to do that. This is, you know, you can't do this. And then I go do it. And then they don't know what to say to me. They're like, wow, that's, you know, you're really showing us, but they don't know how to explain it. It's just, it's really, I hope people take away from this the power of the mind, and how it all works together. And that's what I'm really enjoying about this conversation, Dr. Melissa, is like, it all works together. And if it's one part of this system is out of alignment, it kind of throws the whole thing into chaos. And I think that's what we're kind of talking about, is people are carrying around this baggage, and we all have it. I don't care who you are. There's trauma somewhere in your life that you're not dealing with and not addressing, and you're carrying it around with you. And this is the key, is that it always seems to come back to this, Dr. Melissa. I'm noticing more and more in my interviews as I really drill into this. It always comes back to people have to start spending time with themselves, quality time, and really getting into the, you know, the nooks and crannies of their life. And really, you have to get courage to face it and bring it out of those shadows. It always seems to come back to this. It really does.
Right on. Like, I am so excited to hear you say that, because that really is, that's got to be the message. That's got to be the message. It's like,
yep.
Look at what's going on, look at what's unresolved, look at what is in misalignment. Because that's the thing that's so interesting for me, you know, as a chiropractor was looking for misalignment in the external. But it's always in that. And that's where I was led even before GNM. It's like the misalignment's not in the external. The external is a mirror of the internal. And this comes first. It's always the inside determines the outside. The mind determines the external physical expression. And that's why, you know, medicine doesn't work, is because it's materialistic. It's looking at the outside first, and we're looking for the solution in the material. Okay, let's get rid of this material. Let's put this material in. It's all materialism. And it's taken out completely the psyche, the soul, the spirit, the mind from the equation. And we're just looking at moving physical things around, and it's all inviting you back into the internal, to the psyche, to the soul, to what is going on in there, you know, what's unresolved, what trauma haven't you worked through? And so, yeah, I'm so excited to hear that that's like your message, and what you know, instill in people and help reflect to them is like, hey, look at the thing, look at the, like, your symptom is telling you to look at the thing. Everything in your life is trying to get you to look at the thing. So I think that's so awesome.
Yeah, it was, and it's something like I was saying, as I said earlier, is I've learned over time. It wasn't, and I kind of was, and back in the, like, years ago, I would call it kind of facing my demons. I never even heard the term shadow work, and I would be like, oh, I'm facing my demons kind of thing. But I for some reason, internally, like at a spiritual level, I knew my body, like everything in my being was saying, you have to address these issues. And it's fascinating, and that's why I love what you're doing, and the message you're letting people know about. This is so powerful and so important. It really is that important, and I'm glad that we're bringing this to people, because it makes a lot of sense, and it just shows that people are like, and you're right, people are always looking at the external. This is another thing I harp on. Everybody's always external, find an external, and keep pointing the finger outward. They never point it right back at themselves and maybe wonder what's manifesting is because of them, something they're not dealing with, and this trauma that they're, as I said, we all have it. We some point of it. So it's really important that, like you said, that we really dive into ourselves. And it just makes me realize too that, like, which I may have, I hope I can get you back for a part 2, because I still have so much I want to talk to you about, because then it brings me to like what's going on when parents with abandonment issues, you know, like now parents are so busy, they're sending their kids to school younger and younger, to daycares, they're losing connection with their kids, which is going to manifest because of abandonment. I just see this whole chain of effects that starts so young in life.
Yep. Let's definitely do a part 2.
We got to.
I really enjoyed talking with you, because I think that, like, your interest level and your personal experiences and kind of your journey and your revelations, I think that it's like we're really suited to having good conversations. So
I totally agree. Yeah, I would love to have you back in the future for a part 2 to really get into what even more of what we're talking about, and like I said, like how these things are so important for young, like it's just how you're being, like I just look back and how you're raised, every little thing matters. Like there's nothing when you're around your children and you're raising them, and how every word you say to them, this all matters. It just just something I've realized, and I know parents aren't maliciously going out there and trying to, I don't think, hope they're not trying to mess their kids up, but all of these things matter. And if you're not helping them and walking them through and giving them this knowledge, it's going to manifest into what we're talking about. So yeah, I would love to do a part 2.
Yes, yes, definitely. Yeah, and if your audience has questions, like I'd love to, just kind of do deep dives and get into it, because that's what I'm just, so when I came across this information, I was like, it was 2017, and I thought that I knew everything about health. I thought, because again, I was into nutrition and detox, I was into all that stuff. And I had started doing, like you said, like I started doing that inner work, that shadow work, got it into, I realized, okay, the physical stuff isn't everything, but then this brings that bridge, this brings that final piece of making sense out of why it works the way that it works. And so ever since then, I've been like, I am going to tell everyone about this.
Right. Yeah.
Every time someone invites me on a podcast, I'm like, yes, 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 let's do it, because people need to know this.
They really do, and that's why I'm so glad that we're talking about this. And like I keep saying, it's that important, and I'm going to keep saying it. And it's just so many. I just think of all the trauma that people are carrying around, and whether it doesn't matter if it's a big trauma or a small trauma, they add up, and it's just, you just keep pushing them under and not addressing them, and it doesn't surprise me now, the things that I know and what we're talking about, when you start seeing how people's health is declining. It's just the man, and because of this fear that people are in, that's all they propagate now. And then as soon as one fear is over, they got another fear bullet in the chamber, and they launch that one, and then they get people all in a state of fear, constant. I talk to people every day, Dr. Melissa, that are scared. They're always in this fight or flight mode. That's where they are. They're locked in this reptilian mindset of fight or flight. And then I'm starting to notice their health. They're getting these little symptoms showing up, and it's just, they've always got this fear constant. They have to keep us in that state. So it's important that people realize that we have to get out of that state.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome. But anyways, just to wrap it up, I just want to give you a chance, Dr. Melissa, let anyone, if there's anything that you want people to know, where they can find any of your content, anything that you want people to know, I'll make sure I put links to your presentation for Funnel 3. I'm going to leave that in the description. But anything else that you want people to look up or know what you're doing, what you got coming up, the floor is yours.
Yeah, totally. So drmelissacell.com, that's where you can find me if you want to connect personally. I do sessions for people who want to dive deeper. I have a course that my partner and I teach together called Awareness School, which really it's this inner work. It's let's illuminate the inner workings of the mind so we can figure out, why do I feel the way I feel? What is this all about? And so this is, a deep dive masterclass, 10 weeks of group coaching, where we just expand on all of the things that make you you, and what you can do to start resolving conflicts and finding out what the actual cause of this inner turmoil, what it's all about. So that's coming up. We start next week, actually. So that's kind of soon. I teach a class every Monday called The Language of Adaptation. So for people who want to dive deeper into understanding the biological laws, you can come, ask questions, learn, just hear from other people who are working to apply and recognize this language in their life. And then my YouTube channel is a great place, just if you're like, all right, I want to know a little bit more, check out my YouTube channel. There's a lot of videos on there where you can dive deeper.
That's awesome. And I will make sure I leave links, guys, I promise. And just keep doing what you're doing, Dr. Melissa. This information is truly key, in my opinion. I think people need to start hearing this. So just please keep doing what you're doing. And it's amazing. And this information is so valuable. So thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak with me. I'm already looking forward to having you back for a part 2. I'm sure I'm going to have a list of questions, but I'm also going to suggest, if anyone has any questions for Dr. Melissa, put them in the comments, reach out to me on my email. You guys know it, beenthinkingpodcast@gmail.com. Any questions you have for Dr. Melissa, I will write them down. And then in part 2, I can ask her for you, and we can really get into, like, drill down and, dive in even deeper if you guys want. So please, this would be a great part 2, is to get you guys interacting with us, asking some questions. So I'm looking forward to part 2 already, Dr. Melissa. Thank you so much. You're amazing. You really are.
Well, I'm so grateful that you had me on. Really love this conversation. I think you're super cool, and I'm excited to come on again and dive deeper.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm just going to wrap it up. Do you just want to wait in the background for 20 seconds, and then I can talk to you for a couple minutes afterwards? Is that cool?
Yeah,
All right, awesome. I'll be right back with you guys. There you go, guys. Dr. Melissa Sell, please. This is so important, such important information. I cannot stress it enough. This is something you guys have heard me talk about for a long time now, is how important it is that you start doing the work on yourself. You have to take time to get to rediscover who you are. We're pulled in so many different directions. There's so many things going on in people's lives. It's so chaotic a lot of the times that how much time do you really spend quiet with no distractions and just talking and learning about yourself? And I think people have to, I know they have to. This is the key. You have to start rediscovering who you truly are, and then start diving in, taking the time, caring enough about yourself to go in and start looking at these past traumas, these, what they call shadows, and start really addressing them, pull them out of the shadows, kicking and screaming if they have to. And I'm not saying it's going to be comfortable. It's not going to be fun at times. For me, it's, sometimes it's very tough. And, I get that, but it still doesn't mean that you just ignore it. It has to be dealt with. And that's the key. And if you don't, it's like Dr. Melissa was just saying, it's going to start manifesting in your health. And we're seeing that. The evidence, if you're looking at it, is right there. So thank you so much, guys, for checking this one out. This was a great one. As I said, I'm already looking forward to part 2. I'm going to have a list of questions for Dr. Melissa. So please, just keep checking back in. I'm going to have another great interview lined up. I already have great interviews lined up, guys. So I will be back with another great interview very, very soon. So take care of yourself. Take care of each other. Love yourself. And remember, nobody is greater than you, guys. So I will see you very soon. Take care, guys.